Hello, I just had a experience using freelancing that was not very ideal, and so I wanted to share this experience and what I learned from it. So the project that I had started back a while ago, and what I wanted was, right now the website had a bookly module that kind of looked like this. The time slot are like this, but I wanted the time slot to be arranged like a fixed like length, for example 8 to 10 and then 10 to 12, and then I wanted the number of booking similar to this, like the number of how many available out of how many, or how many book out of how many available. um, and so I wanted, that was the first part of the project, and it seemed pretty easy enough. So, and I didn't have time at that point, so I hired a freelancer to do it. The problem was, he did what I asked, but there were side cases that he didn't do, and I became kind of like his tester. I spent so much time finding bugs, repeating his like the test, because every single change that he made, I have to retest the software, and I wrote down the test steps. He should have been able to do the test himself, but he tested it and he said it works. But for me, when I test it, it doesn't work. And so there were a lot of back and forth about that. And if it's a bug, I tell him what I expected from it, and like there wasn't any scope creep in this project because I outlined what needs to be done and exactly how I want it done. Like start time to end time, I defined it, where they get those values from and everything, and he still cannot follow direction. Like I would send him a message, and I basically will have to send the same message 3 times, reword it about 3 times before he finally understood it. That is also with Skyping and everything involved. So it was very frustrating to have that communication barrier, to have someone who's just like, who just wants to meet the requirement and who didn't test his code. Fortunately, it was a little bit somewhat usable for a month or so, while I actually finished up my other work, and then I took the time to do a code review, and I found that his code had a lot of hacks that, you know, I think the most important thing about working with existing code is you need to understand what the existing code does and try to fit the existing framework. And like his code quality was very bad. He basically put hacks in there just to get the job done quick and dirty. And the time to review the code and to make these changes wasn't long. It took me 2 hours to review the code and find out where to plug it into and how to use their existing function, because Bookly did a really good job with structuring their code really well, and with the data layer and using object-oriented concept and inheritance, and has a good structure and everything like that. And so I don't know why he didn't spend the time to do that. So when I saw that the code quality was bad, it was really frustrating, and that's the reason why there were so many side cases that he missed, because he just put hacks instead of trying to understand what the existing code did and how the new solution fits in with it. To show you a sample of what he did, this is the code, and you can see this is a PHP file. It's supposed to be like a template file where like it has HTML markup, And what they did was they put all the JavaScript in another file. And you can see that down here, he just added his JavaScript into here, which is fine, but I would prefer that he follow the style of the previous code. Like right here. So this one, instead of using their Bookly, it has a database abstraction layer, and so they use what's called entities, and basically each table has a object associated with that table, and it inherits from an entity class, which does all of like the data manipulation, insertion, update. It has the query to do that. And instead of doing that, he just did a straight query. And the thing is, this query is not even needed because it's already retrieved like earlier. There are like data that they already retrieved that correspond to what he needs to do. So this is actually extraneous SQL calls. So there are like a lot of stuff littered around in his code. He mixes CSS styling in the PHP templates, and he didn't use a template file where a template file is will be useful. And so like all this added together is just one hack after another hack, just getting the base requirement, a quick and dirty way to get it working without any consideration for real potential business use. And that's just really frustrating to meet someone that has such a low concern for quality, and like it also reflects that they are not they don't own their work, like they don't want their work to be of highest quality. And so it's just frustrating to see that. However, so when I saw that, I'm like, you know what, I have to rewrite this, and I'm gonna follow the right style and everything. So it took me 2 hours to get the booking slot like done, and it looks nice now. It looks like what I want. Let me show you a part of it. Booking module is like that. Stuff will cross out correctly. The booking slot is retrieved correctly. He actually did not retrieve the booking slot correctly. And then just the booking number, everything, date, time calculation. So that is done. And then I also did the second part of the project that I wanted to do, which is add custom scheduling time. So basically, this booking module, there are work hours. So for example, a business is open from 8 to 12. The work hours is 8 to 12, but then there are some days that are that you want to extend the hours, but you don't want to extend it for all days, so that's what I call a custom schedule. And I added the ability to do that in the back end that will reflect in the booking slot on the front end. And so I did all of that in a week, and the custom schedule part was hard because it required more like work and just logic to get the slot correct, to get book slot to show up correctly, and that needs to take away from the slot chunk. And luckily Bookly already have a function like that I can use, so I try to understand a lot of what they already have and try to integrate my own code into it. And during this process, I learned a lot about their code design, like what inherits from what, how they structure their database and their object-oriented programming principles. And I didn't know that PHP you can, implement inheritance and object-oriented principle using PHP, but now I know that you do. And they do have like a like model view controller type of like design principle going. They separate their data layer from their controller, from their view. And so seeing that it was so well done in a WordPress module really impressed me. I'm not saying that their module is bug free. It's not. I can tell you that. But just being able to easily find where stuff is and where stuff are broken, and easily being able to integrate and extend existing functionality with them, that was good. And then I also learned about template. I didn't know about template before, and I mean, using templates and rendering it to, especially for repeating components, so that that was really smart, and I learned how to do that now. I'm not proficient at using it, but I know it exists, and so now if I do need to use something like that, I know of a module that I can refer to for me to be able to do that. So I learned a lot through this process, and it was one intensive week, but I learned a lot, and I just really liked the way that Bookly designed their stuff. I also learned how to use like JavaScript libraries. They use a datetime picker, and then I ran into a bug where I used the datetime picker, but it wasn't doing anything. And so that time I had to go on to Code Mentor because I just cannot figure it out. The messages were cryptic, and I didn't understand how to solve them. So then I went on Code Mentor, and luckily there was a person there that was really proficient in JavaScript and everything. And he saw it, and he's like, easily, oh, you know what, you haven't registered your JavaScript file. And so I'm like, okay, so where did Bookly register it? So then try to find out where all the script registration is. And so that was interesting, and I really liked it, the pair programming aspect of it, because I would be doing something and he would be like, he saw the stuff that I miss, and then sometimes he gets stuck too because he haven't used this JavaScript library, and so he would be researching it on his end and I would be researching it on my end, and then like I'll be like, oh, you know what, he said something and that got me thinking, and I'm like, okay, so what if we do this and that? And so that was like a nice way to get to solve a problem together, and I didn't get to do that a lot at my previous job. So being able to do that now on my own time is really fun, and I really like pair programming. And then basically, just to start this whole project, I had to set up the WordPress on my Windows machine. I use Windows, so I haven't done anything like that before, and so it was relatively painless. I thought it would be a painful experience, but it was really nice because XAMPP, I can install that, and they and then there's a tutorial that I go through, and the tutorial was really good. Let me get to it right here. So this tutorial site was really good, and it really helped me to just install PHP, Apache, MySQL, and Mercury on my Windows machine and get the WordPress up and running. I downloaded the website and then restore the database and everything, and it just voila, it works. And then from there, I learned how to debug WordPress. I mean, debug PHP code. So debugging PHP code is pretty easy because it's kind of like I'm really used to debugging in Visual Studio already. So the only thing different was that Eclipse is not really. I like Visual Studio Debugger a lot more than Eclipse, but especially I can add watches, conditional watches and stuff. Maybe I don't know how to do it, and there's that functionality in Eclipse, but it wasn't intuitive for me to be able to do that in Eclipse, whereas in Visual Studio it was. So debugging PHP code was a little bit easier. One thing that was kind of frustrating is sometimes the booklet module, like if there's a wrong syntax, it will just keep on spinning instead of like throwing an actual error. And so those time was kind of frustrating and challenging. But besides that, like just trying to understand the logic and stuff, it's not hard to step into functions and stuff like that. However, there is sometimes the bug is in the JavaScript side, not the PHP side. So those, like, eventually I had to learn JavaScript debugging, and I did it before, but now I'm more proficient with it, especially since I use Google Chrome. I just launched the developer tool and then go into the console, the script section, so F12 is actually sources. Open up the source that I want, add the breakpoint that I want, and then just use the stuff that they have. So that was good. I learned that it was very useful to be able to do that, and very tedious because sometimes, especially with the template stuff that I was telling you about, registering like function, one thing was that really messed up a lot of my time is that I would have a class and I would register an on-click function to that objects that with that class, but the problem was that each ID have to be unique, and there were some ID that were the same, and so the on-click function didn't really get registered for the ones that are at index 2. So that really took a lot of time to find out, but eventually it's found. And then if I just change the HTML a little bit, I need to change the JavaScript, so it's a little bit tedious to just make sure stuff are synced up. And I wish that there was an integrated way to debug, like from the JavaScript to the PHP call, especially for Ajax call, and there wasn't a way to do that. There was a little bit of disconnect there, and I had to understand it and get over it and know when I'm supposed to be debugging in JavaScript and when I'm supposed to be debugging in the PHP side. So that one was hard, but then through that I learned how to make Ajax call, I learned how to style, and I learned jQuery. And so right, CSS I'm still not very comfortable with. It's a really painful process to me because especially with Bookly, they have a lot of styling and like setting already, and so sometimes I don't know which one I'm supposed to use, especially since I didn't create those styles. And then there are layering problem. Like for example, there was a button where when you click, there's a spinner that's supposed to spin, but then my button just like not show the spinner. And so like stuff like that really killed a lot of time, and just I know that I'm not a good front-end programmer yet. I just think these are like the styling is very tedious, and just getting it right is hard for me right now. But I'm comfortable with the backend and the JavaScript. So I know that that is something that I need to work on, but it's cool. I get exposure through this project. So now I can customize the Bookly module really well, following good design pattern, following what the Bookly developers had in mind. So I really like that, and I know that I still need more CSS work, but and then another thing I need to learn is how to refactor code, use PHP code, especially in Eclipse. In Visual Studio, they have like help, like if you cut a chunk of code out, put it into a function, they highlight the stuff that you need to put parameters for. Eclipse doesn't do that for you, and so it's a little bit harder to refactor in Eclipse, because you kind of have to keep track of the variables yourself. And the only thing that I get when I refactor incorrectly is that the spinner keep on spinning forever. And so I don't know if there's an easier way to do that, but that's something that I'm going to look into next. And then the last thing is, while doing this project, I did start using GitHub, and I found that a lot of like software company, especially for remote work, they are asking for GitHub accounts. And it's actually a nice way to keep track of my Q&A, and like I've always wanted a place where I can just, especially for something hard that took a lot of time to Google up, I just want to be able to refer to it again easily, and it's kind of like my own wiki, and so I'm using GitHub for that, which worked well. Before it was Bitbucket, but I don't know why I went with Bitbucket. GitHub user interface is so much better, and their formatting is easier also. So yeah, overall it was a testy week, because especially the custom schedule, that development had a lot of testing involved and a lot of logic involved, and I wrote a lot of test cases for it, and so that was very intensive. I also, during that time, I got a lot of new requirements, and then I also found a Bookly bug that took forever to track down. It took me probably 1.5 days to track down until I finally understand the source of the problem, and then I was able to fix the source of the problem. And so it was very challenging, but it was fun also, and looking at it, it's kind of like my own mini boot camp that I created by myself, and so it was very intensive but very rewarding, because I get to learn a lot, and I got a lot of exposure to just like the full spectrum of programming a website from the front end to the back end. So I really enjoyed it. So even though the Freelancer, his code quality was bad, he was the one who just like got me on this rampage and just got me like focused, especially now that I have time to just work on this project by myself and just like learn all of this. So I guess in the end it's not too bad after all, but I still felt like my money was wasted on that freelancer. I wish he paid higher quality and more attention and be more responsible in his job. So hopefully, for all of you freelancers out there, really do work with a good conscience, so that you don't cause another employer to feel really strongly and really like frustrated because their money is wasted on very low quality code. And be sure that you're not just a programmer, but you also need to pay attention to the quality of your work. So test, test, and test. Okay, thank you. Bye.